Hello and welcome to this webinar on the redevelopment of Glasgow Queen Street Station. I'm Jonathan Herbert from the APM Scotland branch and I'm your host this afternoon. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and you are in listen-only mode. This session will last for approximately 60 minutes, consisting of 30 to 45 minutes of knowledge share, concluding with a Q&A session. Please submit your questions via the chat or questions panel during the webinar for us to address at the end. Following this webinar, the recording will be uploaded onto the APM YouTube channel and the slides will be published on the APM SlideShare account, both of which will be listed on the branch community page on the APM website. Please allow 5 working days for this. This session will count to your CPD. Today we are joined by Project Manager Joe Mulvenna and Communication Manager Kim McGuire for Network Rail. Joe has worked in the rail industry for over 30 years. Before joining Network Rail, he worked on the London Underground, and during his 17 years at Network Rail, he has worked on a wide range of projects, including the West Coast Main Line, the Airdrie to Bathgate Rail Link project, Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme, and most recently, the Queen Street Station redevelopment here in Glasgow. He's now set to lead one of the integration teams on the new Leavensmouth Rail Link project using the innovative Project 13 enterprise approach. Turning to Kim, Kim has over 20 years experience within the communications industry. Over the last 7 years, she's been working as the Community Liaison Manager during the delivery of 2 major electrification projects here in Scotland, the Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme and the Stirling-Dunblane-Alloa project. In March 2019, Kim was appointed as Communications Manager for the redevelopment works at Glasgow Queen Street Station. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to you. Joe.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jonathan says, my name is Joe Mulvenna and I'm the fortunate guy that's been the project manager for Glasgow Queen Street redevelopment. I'm going to just run through our PowerPoint this afternoon, as Jonathan stated, and there's a bit at the end for questions and answer. So thanks everybody for tuning in and hope you enjoy it. So first of all, a few introductions. Myself, Joe Mulvenna, Project Manager. On the left, standing at the Queen Street Station entrance from George Square, and on the right we have Kim McGuire, Communications Manager. So first of all, an introduction to Glasgow Queen Street. Glasgow Queen Street Station opened in 1842. The historic barrel roof was then constructed in 1878. Glasgow Queen Street Station is the 3rd busiest station in Scotland, and we have approximately 45,000 passengers per day pre-COVID. As we stand today, we're probably getting about 1 to 1,500 passengers per day. Passenger growth is expected to rise by 40% by the year 2030, so by then we're in excess of 28 million passengers per year. And Glasgow Queen Street redevelopment was the final part of the Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme, known as EGIP, to facilitate the introduction of 8-car passenger trains onto the network. So just a quick overview of the site where we are. So if we look at the red block, that is the existing Glasgow Queen Street Station. The green block is the new enhanced station. The yellow block is Millennium Hotel, which is one of our major stakeholders, and the blue block is where we have our site set up. So very constrained site in the centre of Glasgow. You can imagine the difficulties we've had getting stuff into this site and just generally working in the site in general in a city centre. Anyone who's worked in a city centre will understand the difficulties we have. And also pre-COVID, having to manage 45,000 passengers through this site every day whilst we are continuing to work and build a new station. So project milestones for the project. We had 4 major milestones for this project. The first project milestone was a platform 1 4-car extension, which we have completed. Platform 2 to 5 8-car extensions. So the 8-car extensions will come into a bit later, but the contract completion date was 17/11/19, and we completed this 5 weeks early. Milestone C for the project was concourse, basement and ticket office, and again we hit that project milestone on its date. Remainder of the works, so that's basically everything else that we've left to complete. So the contract completion date for the remainder of the works was the 12th of January 2021. However, due to the world we're now living in, and the impact of COVID we've had in the project and I guess the world as a whole, this milestone date is now revised, and we're looking for completion of all works in Queen Street Station by June, the end of June 2021. So if you look at it from that perspective, due to COVID, we have had a 6-month extension to the programme of works, which, bearing in mind, we had shut the project down for about 12 weeks at the very start of lockdown, and the new working methods we had to adopt. I think everyone has agreed that that's a favourable outcome for us. So, Glasgow Queen Street redevelopment, a few pictures here. Anybody that knows the station, anyone who's passed through the station, I think we'll all agree that prior to us coming in and doing the redevelopment, Glasgow Queen Street Station was not a very nice place to visit. As someone who uses the train to get to work on a daily basis, if I was asked about Queen Street Station, my initial view would be dark, dull and uninspiring. The picture on the left shows a fantastic example of 1970s brutalist architecture, which we unfortunately or fortunately, whatever side of the architecture fence we had to demolish to make way for the new station frontage, and also there was an extension, a 1970s extension to the Millennium Hotel, which had to come down. So we started to take the demolition come down, and 14,000 tonnes of material were removed from the demolition. And of these materials, we had 94% of this material was recycled. So a lot of the materials that we took away from site, predominantly concrete, was crushed, taken off site, and some of it we followed around its life cycle and some returned back to site. So to take down the tower block and the Millennium Hotel extension, we used 10 operatives to do that. And we used 6 small remote control machines, and we used the equivalent of 700 skips. So you will see later on the time lapse how we brought this building down. So basically it was top down, floor by floor, and all the rubble went down the lift shaft and was removed in skips. And to note, at the time of this demolition, both the station and hotel remained operational throughout. And for the people of Glasgow, it was quite a spectator sport at the time, watching the station and the Millennium Hotel extension being demolished. Once the demolition was completed, we moved to building the new structure. So basically, a new L-shaped structure wrapped around the existing station. So this slide here shows you one of our biggest milestones. As we know, it was the south truss. We had to build a 73-metre long truss, which we built on site, and on the weekend we had to lift it in. It was a weekend prior to Christmas, and we had 2 500-tonne cranes that you see in the picture there undertake a tandem lift. This, for my project team in particular, was quite a lengthy planning process. If you understand the city centre of Glasgow, we had to bring these 2 massive cranes to site. the cranes in the picture, that on the weekend the red crane came to us direct from a shipyard in Tyneside somewhere, and the yellow crane came from a wind farm in the north of Scotland. So to get these cranes to site was a massive undertaking. The traffic management, the whole logistics. Each crane came with 4 or 5 wagons that serviced it. As for the truss was built on site prior to it by one of our local contractors, and this was then lifted into position using the 2 500-ton cranes, a tandem lift. I was actually on site this evening with a lot of my colleagues, and for something that took maybe 6 to 9 months planning, to lift from the start of the lift to putting the bolts in to complete the integrity of the structure, it was 30 minutes. So 9 months of planning, 30 minutes of lifting and completion. So that was a fantastic milestone for us, getting this south truss into position. I mentioned earlier the delivering of the 8-car trains was a key driver for the programme. So basically, to enable this to happen, we had to extend platforms 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 in Queen Street Station. And we've done this, this was undertaken in 4 week blockades. So platform 2 and 3, we completed that 4-week blockade on the 29th of July 2019, and that was another great milestone achieved. To put it into perspective, we had to hand these 2 platforms back to the train operators, Abellio ScotRail, at 05:30 on the Monday morning. And when we undertook platform 2 and 3, we were working, doing the last bit of lining of the platforms at 04:30 of the Monday morning. When we complete, we contact our Network Rail Track Control, and within 5 minutes of us giving up, as we call it, the track possession, the first train arrived in platform 2 and 3. So that again, great milestone. Platform 2 and 3 was a real success. However, we understood we could have done better. On a daily basis, whilst doing platform 2 and 3, we undertook a lessons learned. We took the good and the bad, and we took that into platform 4 and 5 blockade. And platform 4 and 5 blockade, we learned a lot of lessons. We took the good stuff and learned from it, and we were in the fortunate position that we handed this back to the train operator 24 hours early. So that was a fantastic effort on behalf of all the contractors and for ourselves. And what it meant was that the train operator could run their trains 24 hours ahead of plan. For these blockades, 24/7 working was undertaken throughout. Again, during these blockades, the station was still operational. 4,000 tonne of material was removed by rail. We are Network Rail. We are fortunate we have haulage. So the picture you see in the centre, one of our trains come in, we load it with concrete. Again, this was recycled. A lot of the stuff that we took out from the blockades was taken away, crushed, and we followed that round its recycling system, and some of it come back onto site as bottoming for platforms, etc. So as part of the extension of the platforms, we had 200 metres of new platform walls and 260 metres of new tracks and OLE. So for what was specifically a building project, we had then the whole multidisciplinary of civils, overhead line, electrifications, signalling. So that was a real multidisciplinary effort, and again, it was a success. So Queen Street Station, you see a slide of the concourse here. When we started on this journey, the existing concourse was approximately 9,050 square metres. We have now expanded that, and the new concourse now is sitting at 2,009 square metres. We have included in this improved facilities for ScotRail, so we have a full management suite for ScotRail and their staff to work in. We have the duty manager has a state-of-the-art office. You can see the picture on the right-hand side with the video wall, which gives the ScotRail staff the ability to manage this station far better than what they had before. We have the state-of-the-art customer information screens, which you see in the picture, and this is the first of the type in the country, and we've had really good feedback from the travelling public on these. So this is an internal view of Queen Street Station, and such a difference for anyone that knows the station. So just a few snaps here from where we were and where we are today. So we have first picture, Queen Street Station, I guess, 1950s, the old British Rail Queen Street Station. We still had trams in Glasgow at this time. You see the trams. Then we kind of moved on slightly in the 1970s, and we see the 1970s Millennium Hotel extension here. And for me personally, it was always a bit of an eyesore. And the bottom picture, you see what Queen Street Station looks like today, and one of our strap lines is for the project is it's going to be gorgeous. Good bit of Glaswegian local dialect there, and I'm sure everybody will agree it is gorgeous. Again, Dundas Street, which is the other side of the station, this picture is from the 1960s, I believe. You can see the old British Rail electrification sign there as well, and the picture on the right is the new Dundas Street elevation of the site. Again, from my perspective, what an improvement to what we had there before. So everything was going swimmingly, like the rest of the world. 31st of March 2020, like the rest of Britain, we locked down. What did that mean to the project? Basically, on the 31st of March, we stood the project down, made the site safe, and all our staff departed from site. Fortunately for us, we were then deemed by Glasgow City Council as essential works, and after a period of approximately 12 to 16 weeks, we then brought the site back to life. So what we brought back was totally different from what we left. With the return to site during the COVID pandemic, we had to really change the way the work took place. Also, we had to change the way we thought and the way everyone operated on a day-to-day basis. A few examples of this: enhanced cleaning regime. So on the site we have full-time cleaners on site cleaning lots of any visible touch points, the offices, the toilets, the messing facilities. All of these are cleaned rigorously on a daily basis. Everyone who enters our site now is subject to a temperature check. So you scan in on the morning. Prior to entering the site, your temperature is checked, and if your temperature is within the allowable range, you come to your work. If your temperature is out with the allowable range, you're then obviously taken aside and the discussions had. Fortunately, as a project, we have had a few individuals within the project who have had COVID. However, we have not had any clusters of COVID-19 within the Queen Street project. One-way systems were introduced, again, to stop, to to stop the spread of the virus and to allow the social distancing, a lot of one-way systems were put in. We introduced enhanced PPE, so everyone's aware of the face coverings, the gloves, the glasses. That's all our normal PPE. But we have examples where we had to risk assess certain activities which we could not do whilst maintaining 2 metres social distancing. So these were when we looked at the risk assessment and we worked these through by using enhanced PPE, we could mitigate the risk. One example of that was when we were laying the tiles on the stairs. It was basically the tiles were 1 metre long and it was a 2-man lift. We looked at doing it with machinery and it wasn't viable, so 2 guys with full face-fitted masks undertook these works. And also we introduced a whole new permit to work system to help us with the management of COVID. So just a quick slide in commercial and contract management. So the Queen Street project comprises several key components making up the cost of £120 million. So that is the overall budget of the works on a whole. So that included acquisition of surrounding land and properties. I mentioned the Millennium Hotel extension. We removed that, but prior to us being here, there was also a Sainsbury's that we had to knock down, a Wetherspoons, and several other little shops, etc. Network Rail project management course. So myself, I work for Network Rail. I am one of the project managers, and we are the client on the job. The job was undertaken by our principal contractor, our Balfour Beatty, and again their supply chain fell underneath. Design development. Our designers are on site with us, so quite a bit of the cost will to them. Signalling, so as part of the platform extension works, we had a signalling contractor, Siemens, on board, and they undertook all the re-signalling for the rail infrastructure as part of the platform extension works. Indeed, the construction, the new concourse building and platforms extensions. Then moving on to the other costs, the softer costs like comms, etc., which Kim will give us a bit of chat on later. So I've not included specific contract values. We've admitted these due to the commercially sensitive nature of the agreements, but as we sit today, the project £120 million, and we are on budget to complete for on that price. The contracting strategy for the project was traditional, with detailed design being carried out by the designer before passing over to the contractor as a build only. The following contracts were placed: detailed design, GRIP 5 design, so Delta Railway Infrastructure Projects is our GRIP process, so GRIP 5 design. And we also had a signalling GRIP 5 design and build, and a GRIP 68 construction for Balfour Beatty with target cost. And throughout the GRIP 5 designer, they were retained to provide support to the site during the construction process where necessary, and that for us has been quite a great help to us on the site. So programme controls. So on this slide here, so due to the complexity of the Queen Street redevelopment, updated programme submissions were submitted by the principal contractor every 2 weeks, and with mid-period and end period. This comprised of an updated Primavera programme XAR submission, along with the accompanying schedule narrative document. The programme was fully cost loaded and resource loaded to enable earned value calculations throughout. Whilst predominantly a civils job, extensions to platform 1-5 to enable longer trains with data changes were also required. So that is, from a signalling perspective, we had to do quite a bit of data changing. to deliver these extensions, all three contractors had to work collaboratively. And what I would mention is that the whole collaboration on the Queen Street project has been excellent. We are fortunate that we are based in George House, which is adjacent to Queen Street Station, and one of the decisions we made early on in the project was that we would cohabit with the contractor. So I share an office, my team share an office with Balfour Beatty, and that's helped us greatly throughout the project. So maybe rather than spending a bit of time pinging emails back and forward, I can walk across the office and speak to my project manager colleague from Balfour Beatty. So that's been a great success for us. So the interfaces were identified and managed through interface meetings again, and we've done quite a lot of good work on the interfacing of the programmes, and with each organisation involved in that. Through the blockades we had Balfour Beatty, we had Babcock, we had Storey, we had Siemens, so we had a lot of different contractors working there, and we brought all them together and it worked excellently. So I'm going to now pass over to Kim, and she's going to tell us a bit about stakeholder management. Okay, Kim?
Right, thanks, Joe. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to go through a couple of slides over the next 5-10 minutes at the most, just to give you a bit of an insight into the sort of stakeholder engagement activity that we've undertaken, particularly over the last couple of years on the project. As you can imagine, on a project like the Queen Street redevelopment, the stakeholder engagement began a number of years ago. In fact, I think it was around about 2013, 2014, when we were doing this sort of public consultation phase ahead of the planning application. And that was quite an extensive group of people that we sought to engage with at that time, as elected representatives, local businesses, tenants, the passengers, train staff. So from the outset, we were sort of keen to create an environment of continuing engagement and take some of those sort of stakeholders on the journey with them. And over the next couple of slides, and it is only a couple of slides, I kind of want to focus on a couple of elements that have worked well for us at Queen Street in trying to sort of manage that process. So I think if Joe, you can maybe put us on to the next slide. So what this slide here is showing is sort of elements of that stakeholder engagement, particularly when we started the kind of construction phase towards the end of 2018 and into 2019. And I'm just going to sort of talk through some of those elements. So as I said, we wanted to sort of take people on the sort of journey with us, given that we were going to be there for a significant period of time in terms of delivering the project over 3 years, and that it was quite a highly visible project, and that we had passengers effectively still going through the station, thousands of passengers every day, where we had a building site coexisting with an operational railway. So how did we do that? Well, Joe mentioned earlier about our kind of unique strap line that's going to be gorgeous, and that was created in line with some hoardings that we had designed by an artist from the Glasgow School of Art. And what we wanted to do there was create something that uniquely identified the project, that this was the redevelopment. And so we took that design of the hoardings that were quite abstract and quite colourful, and sort of created a buzz around the site when we started the construction phase. And we also incorporated those within our social media platform on Twitter. So we were, eager that we would have a dedicated social media platform for the duration of the works, rather than putting a lot of our communications and content and engagement out on the Network Rail platform, where it potentially could become sort of diluted, or there's a lot of other activity going on in the railway. So it was important for us to have that, considering it was going to be our primary channel for engaging with most of our stakeholders. So how else did we bring our stakeholders with us? Well, there's two sort of main groups of their stakeholders. There was a kind of, in terms of external, so we had our passengers passing through the station every day, and we had the sort of wider public within Glasgow passing through the station every day. And then I'll talk a wee bit later about two other groups of stakeholders where our visibility hasn't been that high from a public perception, but it's been equally important. So one of the things we wanted to do was give the public a chance to see what was really involved in the construction element of the works. And in the spring of 2019, as part of the Construction Industry's Open Door Week, we decided, could we safely corner off a part of the construction site to invite members of the public in to have a sort of sneak a peek behind the hoardings and see what we were doing and meet the sort of construction team and the project team. So we made 100 places, free places available, and we sort of advertised in our Twitter feed, and we sent out a news release with a link to the website. And even we were surprised and sort of overwhelmed by the response. Those places were literally snapped up in a couple of days. And the way that we sort of ran the tour was that it would be small groups of 15 to 20 people would come into our George House office, meet the project team, we'd do a presentation for them, we'd have a Q&A session, and then we would take them over to the station, and they could get a real sense of what was involved. They could meet the station staff, the sort of challenges that they had, and navigating passengers through the station every day. And then at the end of that visit, we interviewed some of the people who took part as Vox Pops, put that in our social media channel. And on the back of that, it kind of snowballed that we were sort of inundated with requests to host tours. And I think there was a period in 2019 where every couple of weeks we sort of hosted a tour. And that was interest from graduate engineers, as you would expect, school STEM programmes, community groups. I think we even had a representative from Saudi Arabia Railway at one point who was on a visit to the city, as well as a Dutch delegation on a transport visit. And what we tried to do is, rather than just bring each group in and take them over to the station, we tried to sort of match what was their particular interest or need. Joe's mentioned the sort of collaborative approach that we had at Queen Street, and that we benefited from having the contractor there, and we also benefited from having colleagues close by from Transport Scotland as well. So we sort of tried to match up, were they interested in the bigger strategic message of what we were doing in terms of, Queen Street being part of that driver to create a more sustainable railway, introducing greener, cleaner trains. And if that was the case, we would involve our sponsorship team. We would also involve representatives of Transport Scotland. Were they more invested and interested in the civil engineering challenges? So that worked extremely well from us, and it allowed us to sort of continually to put out good, positive content on our social media channels. And then in addition to that, one of the challenges and also one of the benefits of Queen Street is that there is no big reveal. Essentially, it's an evolving site. It changes every day. It's very public. So the other thing that we did was mark those mini milestones. Now, those mini milestones could be something like a crane arriving in site. Well, what did that mean? That meant that we were able to start work on the roof. Or it could be the first piece of gold cladding being installed at Dundas Street, or the completion of the glazing to the south side. It could be the amount of material, as Joe's already highlighted, that we recycled. So everything we sort of tried to package up. Was it suitable for, video content, and sharing on our social media channels? Was it more suited to maybe selling as a kind of media story? So that's the kind of sort of positive, very public facing side of the stakeholder engagement, that we can get a lot of mileage and footage from. And it continually drives those key messages of why we're doing what we're doing, to create that greener railway. But on the other side of that, there is the sort of stakeholder engagement, which is more behind the scenes and less public facing, but equally important. And I'll just very quickly go through, if we could go on to the next slide, Joe. So what this slide here is showing, Joe had already mentioned in his presentation, I think you need to go back one. So Joe had already mentioned in his presentation that our closest neighbour was the Millennium Hotel, and we also had another hotel close by, the Carlton George. And in addition to those two hotels, and the other big stakeholder for us that had to deal with the challenges every day was, of course, the station and the station staff. So it was important to us, from the outset, that we sort of built a core team that would support them in terms of how we could try and mitigate some of the activity. So, for example, that core team would not just involve myself and Joe. We want to involve representation again from Balfour Beatty, as well as our scheme project managers, that they had this core team that were there sort of on call for them, and also we kept them updated as regular as we could about changes to the programme, giving them advance notice of work. So what did that allow them to do? For someone like the hotels, a lot of the time we couldn't mitigate the impact of certain elements of the work. You know, when we were rivet busting at the east side of the station, undoubtedly that was going to be a noisy part of the work, or if we were putting in if we were piling. If we gave them advance notice, it allowed the hotel to prepare. It allowed them to think, well, if that's happening in 2 weeks, have we now got time to maybe change some of those room bookings and move some of those guests that we have staying into another part of the hotel? And what it was all about really for us, what was key was sort of forging trust, you know, and sort of building that relationship with them over the 3-year period. And we also looked at, Joe and the team also looked at, is there a bit of a room for manoeuvre? If we start an hour earlier or start an hour later, you know, does that benefit the hotel in some way? Or if the station staff have got a large event on that day, if there's a festival or a music event on, if there's some bits of adjustment that we can make to our work programme that will help them. And again, having, you know, a sort of core team on site, as Joe's already mentioned, that we were all kind of working in the sort of one room and the one unit together, that did have a hugely positive impact. And one of the last sort of groups I want to look at, key stakeholders, is a group that was set up 7 years ago during the sort of consultation stage, and it was the Queen Street Passenger Stakeholder Forum. And that consisted of representation from Glasgow City Council, the Chamber, as well as accessibility groups and charities such as Deafblind Scotland and MACS. So when you're undertaking a project such as this, it is we're aware of the inconvenience at times to the passengers, the 40,000 plus people passing through the station every day. But it's a huge challenge if you are a passenger with a mobility issue or you're sensory impaired. And we were very aware of that from the outset, that even though that group might make up a small percentage of our passengers or the travelling public, the impact of the works on them could be significant. So, for example, if you're a commuter and you're leaving on a Friday and you're going through Queen Street and you're coming back in on a Monday morning, and over the course of that weekend, we have changed the layout of the station because there's been a shift and we were now doing an element of the work. That's a bit of an inconvenience for a passenger, but for a person with sensory impairment, that's huge to try and navigate your way through that. So how do we overcome that? We sent out regular written briefs that were very prescriptive in detailing exactly what we were doing, down to actual measurements of, you know, when you come in this day, that entrance will have changed. You'll now need to go X amount of feet to this entrance. And feedback from that group said, well, what would help them would be auditory. So we started to record our briefs and update them on a regular basis. And then that then progressed as actually doing video content, that we did voiceovers, we had subtitles, and then we also had we used sign language in one of our final videos when we got to the stage of the project. We were doing the platform extension works, given that that was one of the elements of the work that impacted on the layout of the station, as well as passenger services. And that had a bit of a ripple effect as well on the back of that, not just for Queen Street, but how we deal with passengers with sensory impairment as a business, and that we've now set up a kind of training course in conjunction with Deafblind Scotland. And towards the end of last year, we had a number of staff at both Waverley and Central who've completed that course. And I think Network Rail is one of the first organisations in Scotland to have staff undertake that in conjunction with Deafblind Scotland. So that really just gives you a flavour into some of the challenges, I hope, that we faced, and how we try to overcome those with some of those key stakeholders on the project, particularly over the last 2 years. And just to give you sort of sense, before I sort of hand you back to Joe for the Q&A, in the autumn of last year marked 3 years since the demolition work started. And we sort of created a sort of timeline video to sort of celebrate that, but I think it really shows the incredible transformation in that time. And I think we've got time to show that just before we go to the Q&A session. If Joe, you want to put that slide on? Okay, apologies there. For some reason, the sound that we had a kind of soundtrack on the back of that, but it didn't seem to work. So apologies for that. So I think I'm going to hand you back to Joe now for the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Kim, and I hope everybody enjoyed what we had to share today. And feel free to ask any questions. And if we can't answer the questions here today, I'm sure we'll get them answered by correspondence.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Joe and Kim, for your really insightful and interesting presentations. I think the new station transforms the city centre of Glasgow, and I'm really looking forward to using it in the near future once the restrictions relax somewhat. I've got a question for you, Joe, in terms of, you mentioned a few times throughout the presentations on keeping the station operational while you were doing all of these works. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about the planning that you undertook and the measures that you actually implemented to keep things moving and flowing over the last 3 years.
Yeah, Jonathan. So basically, we have, as I mentioned, we're in a joint office with Balfour Beatty. We're fortunate that ScotRail and their team are in the station. So we had a very detailed set of phasing plans, which showed each phase of the works and basically where the public would be within the phases. So we undertook a lot of pedestrian flow modelling, ped flow modelling, and we understood with that information we had how people react and how pedestrians operate. And with that, it allowed us to predict the flow of passengers. And when we had our phasing plans, we quite rigidly had a weekly meeting with the contractors, with ScotRail, with Kim and the communications team, and we reviewed these plans on a weekly basis. As Kim says, some weeks you would come up off your train and it would be a total, like as if you were working in a different station, but the communications we put out was key. But for us, the review of the phasing plan was equally as key. And for our project management team, it allowed us to visualise in advance what the station would look like when we were doing certain elements of work. To manage a work site, a full construction site, which 45,000 people pass through on a daily basis, is a monumental effort by all. And I don't take any credit for that. My team done a fantastic job, as did ScotRail, Balfour Beatty, and all the other contractors that worked on the project, pulling all this together. And I think it would be fair to say, Kim might give me the details, but every move we've done and everything that we publicise, the feedback that we have had on social media for Queen Street Station redevelopment has been fantastic. We had the public have really engaged in this, whether that was because they seen the benefit of something in the city centre of their city. Glasgow's a beautiful city, and the station, Queen Street in particular, let it down. So we have now built this station for the people of Glasgow and everyone that comes to visit our beautiful city to enjoy. You can now stand on the concourse and look out onto George Square, which is one of the main gathering places in the city centre of Glasgow. So, fantastic. And as I say, the phasing diagrams and the weekly meetings with the team, or daily meetings on some occasions, helped us no end. Hope that answers that, Jonathan. I know I went on a bit there.
No, it does. And I wonder whether the restrictions due to COVID-19 were actually a blessing in disguise in some respects for the works, because I assume that had you had a noticeable reduction in the throughput of passengers.
Yep. So as of today, as we said just now, the numbers on ScotRail trains are 92% down. So for us, what did that mean to me as a project manager? It meant lots of things. One thing it did mean to me that due to the reduction and alteration of the train services, I could work at different time periods. So I'll give you a for instance. At present, one of the last pieces of our jigsaw was to carry out works in North Hanover Street entrance. The original plan for that was to do this by closing the entrance in two halves, and it would take a significant amount of time to do it. However, having discussed this with our colleagues in ScotRail and Balfour Beatty, due to the reduction in footfall and the additional accesses we have opened in Queen Street Station, we came to an agreement that we were in a position that we could close this entire entrance to Queen Street Station. And by doing that, it allowed us to take approximately 8 weeks off the overall programme. So from that perspective, COVID has been, once we get back to work, it's made our life difficult. I mentioned the additional measures, the PPE, but it has allowed us to undertake works at a time that we probably wouldn't. For instance, Queen Street Station, the last train out of it would usually be about 00:30. At the moment, the station's closing at 2200 every evening. So what that means to us, we can start our works at 2200 every evening. And I think it's important for everybody to realise that although this is predominantly a building site, if you like, we have worked this site 24/7 from the conception, and we're still working day shift and night shift. A lot of the works we're undertaking we cannot do whilst the travelling public are there. We can't bring any heavy machinery onto the platforms or the concourse, so a lot of our works has been night shift as well. So to answer your question, yep, we have had benefits. With the negative side, with the additional PPE, social distancing, and all the stuff that everyone has to do in their new life. However, we have benefited from the reduction in footfall and the reduction in passenger services.
That's very good. No, that's very clear, Joe. I have a question for you, Kim, about the public relations side of things. And over the 20 years that you've been in PR, then what have you seen? Social media now is such a big part of that, I think. Now, how have you seen that develop over the years, and how important is it to the management of projects?
Particularly for this project, because a lot of Network Rail's work or the projects that I'm involved in, particularly if there's a community liaison element, it's usually because you're dealing with line-side neighbours. That's where most of our work takes place, on track, and not as a kind of standalone construction project, which essentially Queen Street redevelopment is. So a lot of our content is still done through sort of briefings and updates and letters, particularly for those sort of projects and works that we're involved in. But for Queen Street, very much so, it has been socially media content driven because of the time, and it's increasingly so more and more. Obviously we're now in a world now where people expect very quick responses and very quick turnaround and feedback to them, and that is an advantage and a disadvantage from a comms perspective. But where it has been, I suppose, an advantage as well for Queen Street is something that you touched upon a couple of minutes ago about the challenges of COVID. So while shutdown and lockdown and less passengers was really good for the construction side of the team, in terms of content for the comms side, when we were in that period of lockdown, there wasn't a lot. There was no one there to take photographs from our side, from the communication side. So because we had so invested, tried to build up this relationship with the passengers and the public and take them on that journey with us, what happened during those 3 months of lockdown was that the odd passenger or person who did go through the station was taking photographs and sharing them on our Twitter, and we thought, well, there's a bit of content that we can use. It was very, reciprocal, and that worked well for us during that specific period. We could only put out content that sort of compared and contrasted old photographs, or said we can't wait to see you back, but we couldn't actually put any new content on when we were in lockdown. And it might just be somebody was passing in the morning and there was the sun hitting off the frontage of the station, somebody would take a great shot and we could share that. So for during COVID, the challenges of COVID, it worked to our advantage. But yes, it is so much material now is very social media driven, and you'll know that if it's photos or if it's video footage, that's really, you know, a lot of our focus now is on that visual content.
Mm-hmm. No, that's the way things are going. I think seeing that across all industry sectors now in what they do. I don't know if everybody's very shy or that you've answered all their questions, Kim and Joe, but I don't have any questions coming up on the screen here. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to tell us before we start wrapping things up here.
Hi, Jonathan. It's Sarah here. I have a number of questions that, if you just bear with me, I'll see if I can share with you so you can go through those.
I'm not seeing anything at my end.
No problem. You just bear with me.
Lots of questions.
Thought we were getting off the hook, Jonathan.
No, not just yet. So if we start with this question here, which is, what would you say was the single biggest factor in the on-time delivery of the programme of the works, Joe?
I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind it was down to the collaboration of the contractors, Balfour Beatty, Network Rail ourselves as a client, and ScotRail, along with our funder Transport Scotland. So without that collaboration, again, the knowledge that we brought, a lot of the people employed in the site have been employed in other big projects. So I think the collaboration is number one, and cohabitating with your contractor, for me, there's nothing that beats it.
Okay, that was a really good question, Rachel. Thanks for asking that. I also see Ashok has been asking some questions. He's got about a half a dozen here, so well, maybe time-wise we might not be able to go through all of them, but let's see which one here. So he's asking about the recycling of the 14,000 tonnes of materials that came from the demolition. Did you get money back? Did you make any profit on the recycling of those materials, or was it break even or cost? How did it work out? What did you do financially with the materials that you were recycling?
So basically, we didn't make any profit on them. However, what it did mean, if you look at the tower block we took down, predominantly concrete, so that was crushed, and we used it in bolting in some of the platforms. So basically, we didn't save money. However, we did not pay for that material twice, if you like. So we didn't make a saving, but we didn't spend money on other material. And again, for our recycling credentials, it was fantastic. All
right. Well, I hope that answers your question, Ashok. And Jan Adams here has a question for you, Kim, about how did your understanding of stakeholders evolve over time? How much did you know up front, and how much did you learn as you went through the project?
I suppose that's a good question, because I came in later. I wasn't in at the start, so the project started in 2014 in terms of that kind of consultation stage, and the stakeholder engagement then would have been different from the stakeholder engagement when we were actually physically on the ground. It would have been a much bigger group in 2014 to get those kind of opinions and needs and feedback that fed into the sort of redevelopment plan and the consultation and what we were doing. So for me, I think it was working in such close proximity to our stakeholders. On previous projects in the railway, as I mentioned earlier, the EGIP project in the SDA, because it was line-side neighbours, and it's often a very moving, if it's piling work you're doing, you're a moving site, so you're only in one particular location for a short period of time and then you're moving on, whereas we were there pretty much 24/7 for 3 years. So it was really building up. It was having your stakeholders in such close proximity to you every day, particularly the hotel and obviously the station staff. And while there might not have been, in terms of those stakeholders, a lot of stakeholders, it was quite a sort of intense relationship that you built up over that time. So that's probably been a bit of a learning curve. You know, it wasn't sort of stakeholders that you engage with every now and then. It was sort of every day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's. I think you make some good points there. So, and I hope that answers your question, Fergus. Sorry, that wasn't from Fergus. That was from Jan. So, but moving on to Fergus, then he's looking at the benefits realisation from the project, and you know, obviously, so we've got a new building appeared in George Square, but other than the completion of the building works, then what's the benefits realisation strategy for the project? What is having this new station going to achieve? Joe, is that one that you can answer?
I'll come in that one. So basically, the station was only built to facilitate the 8-car extension. So had we been able to fit the... Oh, wait a minute. I'm away. I'm there.
No, you're still there, Joe.
Still on the line.
Still there? Yeah. Had we been able to fit the 8-car extension into the existing footprint of the station, we would not have built this new station. So the whole purpose and the whole reasoning behind the project was longer trains, longer greener trains, to allow us to move people faster between Glasgow and Edinburgh. So we kind of touched on the EGIP programme of works, and that was Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme, which was a £880 million project, and Queen Street was the last piece of the jigsaw of that. So in effect, the benefits that we have realised is that we can now run 8-car electric trains between Glasgow and Edinburgh, and the kind of offset to that is we have this new beautiful state-of-the-art building in the city centre of Glasgow for the people to use it that are using our electric trains. So we're encouraging people to use the station, so we have this wide open concourse, but that would not have been there had it not been for the extension of the platforms to facilitate the 8-car trains. So I hope that makes sense.
But I think as well, Joe, probably what that concourse also allowed, maybe for the first time as well, as a consequence that we had to build towards the south and not towards the north, was that we've got step-free access for the first time throughout the station, with the accessibility ramp and the new glass lift that leads from, you know, street level up to the concourse or down to the basement. And also we have a change in places facility for those passengers with very particular sort of needs. So there's those benefits as well. And I think the idea was as well to create this, not just the station concourse, but a feeling of a public space, you know, a public space that people can pass through. Even if they're not going for the train, you know, they can pass through that nice public space and environment that links right, you know, North Hanover Street, George Square, and right to the other side. So the step-free access was a big bonus as a result of the way that we had to physically do the works.
Okay, that's very good. There's a whole bunch of questions here, but looking at the time, then the time's up. So I think so. We'll probably have to wrap up at that point, and we'll answer some of the questions. What we'll do is we'll get the questions sent over to you that we didn't get to discuss on the call today. I'll get those sent over to you, Kim and Joe, and you can maybe answer them in due course.
That's fine.
Get back to people, but well, I think all that remains is to sum things up, and thank you, Kim and Joe, for really good. He's had enough. It's been really interesting to hear about.
No, thank you for having us.
We appreciate everybody that's joined us to look at the presentation, and as I said at the outset, then the recording will be uploaded to the APM YouTube account in due course. The slides will also be available on the APM SlideShare account, both of which will be listed on the branch community page on the APM website. So thanks again for joining us, and
thanks very much.
we hope to see you next time.